Hey, welcome back, everybody, to another episode of BCS Community Connections. And today on the podcast, we have none other than Courtney Allen from Courtney Allen Family Law. And today we are going to talk about your law firm that you have here in the Bryan College Station area. You service areas outside of that as well, too. So we're going to kind of let you go through this starting point of the podcast and talk about your background. So we want to hear where you grew up, what brought you here, kind of how that whole evolution happened for you being a Bryan College Station resident. So you started and grew up where?
In Arlington.
Okay.
And then I came down here to go to A&M. I had family ties here. So my grandfather was born in the tiny little community of Harvey that doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
I went to Bryan High, got 3 degrees from A&M, so longtime Aggies. It was the only place that I applied for college. I didn't apply anywhere else. But then after college, I went to law school in Virginia Beach. I wanted to go somewhere outside of Texas and just get a different experience for a while.
Okay.
And
that's a good choice of location there.
Yeah.
I mean, at least you stay somewhere on like coastline and that kind of stuff.
Well,
so.
and it was being close to Williamsburg and Washington, D.C., and I didn't get to see as much of that as I would have liked, but it was a good experience.
I'm always amazed. So my wife and I have spent a little time there on some of our vacations. Like you think of Texas and you assume everything else across the United States is like Texas and drive time. And it's hard to kind of imagine getting in a car in like 2 or 3 hours where we get between cities here. You get between states there. Yeah. So it's, that's, you know, when I think about that area, that's kind of what I think about. It's like we just crossed the state line. Like that was crazy. So
yeah, we drove up to New York, upstate New York, 1 year on our fall break, and I'd go through Virginia, Pennsylvania, and all of that. And so
you're checking off of when the people send down their little social media posts about check all the states you've been in. I'm like, I've been to all these because I took a drive up to one spot that covered all 4 of these states here. So
So after law school, I went back to the Dallas-Fort Worth area, and I ended up getting a job with the Attorney General's office. And I was doing child support, enforcement collection, and started in Dallas and worked in 3 different offices during my time there. I was there for 7 years.
Okay.
And moved up into management in those 7 years. The last couple of years I was in management. And I loved doing what I was doing for the Attorney General's office, but the management part I didn't enjoy so much. And it wasn't that I didn't enjoy management. At one point, I remember looking around and realizing that, let me back up a little bit and say that that was my safe government job. And I had, got my paycheck on the first of the month, and I had my health insurance and all of those benefits.
Yeah, you didn't have to worry about the state of Texas folding up.
Right.
Okay.
Or that, I didn't think I was ever going to get fired or anything like that.
Right.
But then I was managing an office of 35 people, and I'm responsible. I'm, the one that if anything happens in that office, it's on me, which that's the job that I took on, and I accepted that. But I also realized that with that, there's political things that go into that. People take personal dislikes for whatever reason. And I didn't feel like my boss was looking to get rid of me, but if that ever came about, it wouldn't be that hard because so much was going on in that office. Mistakes were happening. It was just part of the job.
Well, and in that role, you can't see what everybody's doing at any given glance. You're responsible for the overall outcome or the overall outcome of that office, but at any given point, one person can put you sideways.
Exactly. Yeah. And, and I may have done everything that I could do to support that person and give them good training, and they just go rogue, but it's on me. Yeah. And so that really made me realize that there could be a target on my back at any time. Yeah. And so I started looking at other options. And my sister was actually already working down here for a pharmacy, and she had a customer who was an attorney. And we started talking about the possibility of me coming in and partnering up with him. And we didn't end up partnering up, but I did make the leap that I never thought I would make to go out on my own and to expand into all of family law. So rather than just focusing on the tiny little sliver of child support, now I do every aspect of family law. And he gave me an opportunity that I really probably wouldn't have taken otherwise, except just right timing. And I really feel like it was kind of a God thing, the way everything worked out. And so I did that 13 years ago on January 2nd. It's been 13 years. And whenever I made the change, I thought, well, I'll give it a year. And if things don't go well, if it's not quite what I think it's going to be, then I can go back to the Attorney General's office, but I just won't go into management.
Right.
Because I hadn't burned any bridges or anything like that. And then, like I said, it's been 13 years, and now I can't imagine going back. So.
Yeah, so 07, 08?
08.
Yeah, mm-hmm. So, and for you walked back into a community that you were at least familiar with because mm-hmm. you'd gone to A&M here. You said you had 3 degrees.
My grandfather had 3
degrees.
Oh,
okay, sorry. I misunderstood you there. Came to A&M, graduated with what? What was your...
Undergrad was in history, minor in English.
Okay. And then, so let's talk about how this avenue then aligns for family law. So you decide you're going to go to law school, but before that, something has to trigger here. So what was it that kind of brought that in alignment for you?
Well, and so the way I describe my career path is always, it's like the options just kind of narrowed down, mm-hmm. and it was the next logical step. I didn't know any attorneys growing up. I had one friend whose father was an attorney, but I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what attorneys really did. I didn't have any exposure to what that meant.
Right.
But the funny thing is that whenever I decided I was going to major in history because I just loved history, and I'm a history nerd. And I, of course, went home and told my mother, and she was appalled.
I can't imagine why, right?
Yeah.
Let's talk about what you're going to do with that history degree there.
Her response was, you're either going to be a coach, because she was a teacher and all the coaches at high school taught history, or you're going to be a lawyer. And my response was, well, I'm not going to do either one of those. I'll figure it out. And so, of course, but through my time at A&M, and there were, in my history classes, there were tons of people who said they were going to go on to law school. And I started looking at it and thinking about it, thinking, okay, well, maybe that would be something that I would enjoy. And so I made the decision to go to law school. And when I started law school, I wanted to be a constitutional lawyer. I was going to, fight for the rights and, all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I got out, I wanted to be a prosecutor. And I ended up getting on with the AG's office. And it was a good mix of... There was prosecution to it because you're asking for people to go to jail for not paying their child support, right. So it had that aspect of it. But there were other things involved as well, and I had an excellent boss who was a really great mentor to very young attorneys, and so she taught me the ropes. And now that's something that I hope to be able to do, is to mentor other people, other attorneys, young attorneys, and kind of help them out in their practices. So
it's interesting that when you jump out of law school and you get your job at the AG's office, and now it's okay, I've landed that job, right? Like cush hours, I've got, security, as people kind of tend to put it. I've got security of the state of Texas underneath me, benefits, all of these other things. Was there a moment in that career of the AG's office that you could kind of feel the pull of doing something on your own, as opposed to the comfort, as we were talking about before we went on air there's in the corporate world, and I know we're talking state here, but in the corporate world, we talk about this underlying sense of confidence, I guess, that kind of goes along with having that job. Like, it's not going to go anywhere, and I know that they're not going to fold, and I've got all these resources and all this stuff that's kind of behind you. Like, at any given point, if you needed something, it's readily available to the state of Texas. Right. So whether that's people resource, whether that's money resource, whatever the case may be. And so, do you feel like at some point again, we're talking about how circumstances change for people, right? And my circumstance, when we were talking off air, was my daughter was born, and that kind of changed my focus on things. Was there circumstances or things like that kind of came forward and you kind of went, did you feel like you weren't getting challenged? Tell me what that looked like to pull you to be an entrepreneur in this part of it, as opposed to just running the safe spot?
Sure. So when I started, it's called a line attorney, and then I moved up into management the last couple of years. And I think part of it was moving up into management. And it wasn't that I didn't like management. It was you have the forces coming down from this, the top down of these are the goals that you've got to meet, and these are the things that you've got to do, and you're responsible for this. And without a lot of consideration of what parameters you're working with in your particular office.
Yeah. You're expected to hit this metric. Mm-hmm. You're expected to push whatever it takes to get to those metrics. Right. It's very metric driven.
Yes.
Right. And then also, I would imagine outside of all of that, the politics as well.
Right.
Like once you move up, there's an unveiling, right? It's almost kind of like the man behind the curtain. You get to see a little bit more than you did in the role that you were in. So now you found that the position is now more metrics driven for you, really not taking you into consideration anymore.
Right. And I enjoyed going to court and I still did go to court as a managing attorney, but there's all the other stuff that's added to it. And so it was taking me out of the role that I enjoyed so much. At the same time, in my personal life, I had moved at least an hour away from my family. I have a very close, tight-knit family, and I'm very blessed that I have that. And I had grown up in Arlington, and we kind of all stayed in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And then the funny thing is that over the course of a couple of years, everybody kind of migrated down to Robertson County, so the Brazos Valley area. And so while I'm going through these extra pressures at work, I'm also dealing with family members moving away or not being as close as they had been in the past. And that was hard, personally being lonely and not having that support system. Yeah. And so I think what I've always described is that I feel like for me personally, God moved me into a more difficult position in order to move me out. Yeah. Because I was happy at the Attorney General's office as a line attorney. I loved my job. Right. And I don't think I would have ever left had I not moved up into the next level. But also being who I am, it wasn't, I couldn't not move. I couldn't have that, be there and not want to move up into that next level.
Well, there's this, what would I refer to it as? It's almost, it's not, for some people it's the challenge. For other people it's this is the natural progression. I do this, then I do this, then I move to this. And it's also the idea of that confidence, I guess, is being built through there. And you're going, I do this really well, so I should be able to naturally take the next step and do this. Then you get into it and you start realizing all of a sudden you're going, okay, this isn't all about me anymore. Like, at least when you're at that starting point, it's what I do that matters to the team over here and that manager that's above me and everything else. Then you step into the role, and now all of a sudden you're realizing, okay, I can do so much as an individual, but really my team-based opportunity here is just that. It's based on a group of individuals that then produce the metrics that is now expected of me, right? And you want to believe that the team that you lead has the same goals, the same work ethic, the same everything, integrity, everything else that kind of goes along with that to push towards the metric. And did you find, like, when you had those folks up underneath you, that you started seeing like, I'm having to corral like certain people and things like that to keep them all pushing towards the common goal, which is what I'm responsible for? Yeah,
it was that. It was not having those metrics aligned with what I felt was realistic given the situation. So just as an example, for the Attorney General's office, they want to establish paternity. So they want to know that a child has a particular father, which is important, and the state has reasons for needing to do that.
Sure.
And then also collecting child support. So they wanted you to collect money, and they're getting federal funds as a result of meeting those targets and all of this stuff. And so I was in Plano, which is a very, very, very wealthy area. We had no problem at all collecting money. We could do that every day, meet that goal, no problem. Establishing paternity didn't happen because all of our people in Plano, most of our people in Plano were married whenever their children were born. And so the paternity was already established. That wasn't something. And so whereas I started my career in South Dallas, it was exactly the opposite. Had always had a hard time collecting money, had no problem establishing paternity.
Right.
And it's just that particular area. And so the frustration of having these goals that were, again, determined by some person in an ivory tower in Austin who didn't know
disconnected
that what we were really dealing with, and therefore wasn't adjusting it to make it more realistic. Give me a goal that I can meet, and I'll meet it.
It's interesting because, again, whether it's big corporate world, whether it's state-based or whatever, because a lot of the knock on state-based, even city-based jobs in a lot of cases are, well, it's all taxpayer money and that's all funding this, and there's no true accountability in a lot of cases. That's a vantage point from somebody outside in looking in. And then here you are inside the machine itself. You're inside of it and you're like, wow, like this is not how this goes, and to that point, when you're in it and you do it every single day and you've come from the culture from bottom up, right? You start looking at some stuff and you're looking at it going, okay, I know what's realistic because I've been there, done that job, so I'm managing people that I've already done what they're doing, and I feel like my line of sight to what they're doing is better. But regardless of what you see and where you've come from, especially, and I think the disconnect happens the further up the ladder you go, right? And the further up the ladder you go, especially when you start talking about that keyword you referenced federal funding, right? Like we need this money, and this money doesn't come to us unless we hit these numbers. And these numbers in my ivory tower up here, I can't make happen. You're going to have to make happen. Right. And then it all falls to a point, just like it's a trickle down effect. And during the trickle down, the pressure gets higher and higher and higher until you've reached this level of, like you said, what feels like unobtainable or unrealistic metrics that you're asking for. And then you're doing that every year. So, hey, last year you did this. So this year we're turning in, or the federal government expects us to be this % higher. And now you're right back in the hamster wheel, spinning it again, going, okay, last year was really tough. How am I going to meet this year? And, in the child support world, what are you doing? Are you over here going, we need more divorces to make more child support, or we need more people to get better jobs so that they pay more? I mean, there's an avenue of in and out, meaning you're going to have some new people that enter into the chute, so to say, and people who are exiting the chute, meaning those people who their kids get to 18 and they're now legally not obligated anymore and all that good stuff. So indirectly, you think God then is working as pulling each family member away one by one, bringing them to an area, they're not all coming to Bryan College Station, but they're coming into an area that's close to this area, which you already have ties back to through college and through your parents being here, and making that even more of a lonely battle, right? Like you're up here fighting these metrics, but then now it's like, I feel like I'm really by myself. Right. And so was this the draw again of like, is this what you want to do for the rest of your life? Is this where you want to be?
Yeah, I didn't know. Like I said, I really took a leap of faith, and it was a pure leap of faith for me. I'm single, so I didn't have someone else bringing in an income to cover. It's all you. If I make it, I make it. If I don't, I don't. Yeah. And like I said, I do have a very supportive family, so if I could have gone to them for help if I needed it. Right. But it was jump and see. And it worked out, and I'm very blessed that it worked out. And I can't say those first years were pretty lean years. And
Yeah.
so, and I did get help from family in certain ways, but at the same time, I enjoyed the freedom of being able to determine what cases do I take.
Right.
Do I get to decide, am I going to deal with this? I get to decide, am I going to go to this county and deal with this judge, rather than being told by somebody else that, yes, these are the counties that you're going to go to and you have to do that.
Yeah.
And so the longer I did it, the more I kind of got addicted to that ability, even in spite of all of the risks. And, there still is risks. I think one of my things that I've learned over the years is that I was always worried about my safe government job, and I call it my safe government job, and leaving that.
Yeah.
But the reality is, while I think from that perspective, looking at going into business, I thought it would be riskier. Now I almost look at it as the reverse, because at my job, someone could have fired me.
Sure.
Now, thankfully, that was never on the table, but that could have happened.
Yeah.
And so I could have gone from one day to the next, not having a job and not having any income. Now I have risk, but the likelihood of all of my clients firing me at the same time is pretty slim.
Right.
And so while my income does fluctuate and it goes up and down, and sometimes I have more cases and sometimes I have fewer cases, but I don't ever have zero.
Yeah.
And thankfully, since the first day, I've not ever had zero.
Yeah.
So,
well, and so in the corporate world, people who leave the corporate world to go be an entrepreneur, to work for themselves, sometimes that's met with the fantasy of, I'm going to work for myself. Kind of, what you were saying earlier about nobody's really controlling my destiny over here. Like, they just willy-nilly one day decide to get sideways with me, and now I'm not their girl or their boy anymore. And so out the door you go, and I'm going to bring somebody else in. And Texas is definitely a tough state for that to be in, because you're in an at-will state, right? So people make those leaps from the corporate world and they move into an entrepreneurial role, and they get in there with this idea of, this is going to be so much better for me. But so much better has to be built up. A lot of entrepreneurs in the beginning find those longer hours and things that's requiring more capital from their own pocket, hours of invested time. They're now doing things that in that corporate world they weren't really responsible for. They didn't have to worry about marketing themselves. They didn't have to worry about where my customer is going to come from. They didn't have to worry about building not just the business and the brand, but also their image as well too in the community that they're serving. And so it's this stepping, like you were saying earlier in the beginning, it was lean years, and then you kind of build that as you go through. But you do come back into an environment where you're now back into your family circle is closer to you. You have more support there, which mentally has to be just huge prop up, where as before where you're saying like, man, I'm up here and it's just me. Now all of a sudden, even though it's not your family in the law firm, it's them just being there as support, sounding boards, being able to diffuse, and just kind of, let me take this weekend and reset. Let me have a little family time. Let me refill my tank and let me get back to it. And so you do this year after year in building the law firm. So the law firm comes to be, was it Courtney Allen Family Law from the get-go?
It's had Allen Law Firm and then Courtney Allen Family. So a couple of different names, yeah.
Why put your first name on it?
That was actually a decision from the marketer that I guess at the beginning of last year, I hired somebody to come on and do some social media marketing for me. And they wanted to personally it's always been Allen Law Firm. In the state of Texas, for a law firm, you can't have a trade name. It has to be your name. Right. And so it was some variant of my name. But then adding the Courtney Allen Family Law to my social media aspect, they just, I guess, felt like it would be more personal, which I'm fine with that. Well, listen,
I mean, if you put two of these on the desk and you say Allen Law Firm and you say Courtney Allen Law Firm, I'm really not trying to be a sexist here. It's going to probably sound that way, but Allen Law Firm to me is probably going to sound like potentially a male-owned law firm. And in family law, especially in family law, this really kind of becomes what can, even in some people's decision-making process, what can be their decision as to who they go with.
True.
You know, the female that's looking, whether they're initiating it or whether they're being initiated into it, especially in divorce law or whatever, is probably going to feel more comfortable being around a female lawyer. Now, again, I'm generalizing this, and I know that there will be some people that may listen to this and go, that's not the case. But then I asked you again, kind of before we went on air, about your percentages, like how, you know, what percent of men versus what percent of women, and we were saying about 20% on men. And you brought up a great point, though, in sitting there, because I'm thinking, again, at that same point, in that statement that I just made, I'm thinking, okay, a man's probably thinking, let me go get me a bulldog lawyer or whatever, you know, and that's going to look like, you know, the Texas Hammer or whatever that guy is, you know. I mean, it's going to look like somebody who's going to go out there and get them the most for their money. But then you'd commented saying, you know, of that 20% of the males that come in, it is the idea that they're coming in to bring a female lawyer into court to present a less strong, I don't know what the word would be. You're going to have to help me probably with this, but a stronger front.
I think they feel like it. I've had a lot of men comment and say that they feel like family law is biased against men. And I don't personally believe that, and I have my reasons for why I don't personally believe that. But, and so I think they feel like that it's going to give them a better position in court to show up with a female attorney.
Right.
And, you know, that may be the case. I don't know that I personally believe that. I don't see my gender in what I do.
Sure.
I just try to do the best job that I can.
Sure.
But at the same time, I do think that some female attorneys bring certain qualities to the table that can be beneficial.
Right. Better understanding, even from the opposite side.
I think so. I think there is some of that softer, more consideration of the emotion. Family law is extremely emotional.
Yeah.
I mean, there's huge
Volatile.
emotions that go in with that. And so, and again, I'm not trying to be biased, but I do think that female attorneys can be a little bit more understanding. Not all of them. Some of them don't care about the emotions.
Sure, yeah.
And that's not to say that male attorneys can't, but it does tend to be a female-dominated portion of the law that you're going to see more female attorneys in family law as a general rule, in my experience.
Well, I mean, listen, so most people's biases are going to be created by their environment. So if I've got a bunch of friends who are divorced and they've been through and they're going through this deal, and after they get through with the deal, they go, man, I got screwed in this deal, man. I lost half of this. I lost the house. I did, you know, and those are what's fed in. Now, all of a sudden, maybe I come to the forefront and I need that service. Those stories and those friends, I mean, you think about where's the first place that most people are going to go. First place isn't going to be your doorstep.
Right.
The first place is really going to be close friends, people that they trust, and then they're going to kind of work through, like, you know, they're for some people, they're the initiator. For other people, they're the receiver. Probably, I think I might have asked this question before we got, like, how many times is it amicable? Like, both people went, this is what we need to do. And it, you know, because I'd imagine those are probably easier to deal with than the one that's getting served of going, I'm done with you, and you're getting blindsided by it.
So the trick with those, though, is, because I'll have people call me up and they'll say, oh, you know, it's all agreed to. We've already talked about everything. Everything's agreed to. And my retainer is still going to be a little higher than, like, true, everything is really agreed to, because I've through experience learned what happens a lot of times is that they think everything's agreed to, but it's not really, because they either haven't really talked through everything, or the relationship dynamic has been that you've got one really strong person and one person who just kind of goes along. And so the person who just kind of goes along is just like, okay, sure, whatever. But then once they actually get into it, they start digging their heels in, because this is important, and they need to stand up for themselves. But the strong personality has just kind of steamrolled them, and they're the strong personality is the one that calls me and says, oh yeah, everything's agreed. And so, it does still happen, though. I would say it is a fairly slim margin, 10% maybe, that are really, truly, they really have sat and considered everything and talked through everything, and they really are on the same page.
But these are also the 10% at the tail end. Like if there's kids involved in this, co-parenting becomes a lot easier. Child,
Absolutely.
Who's getting custody, which again you deal with, child custody, child support, all of that other stuff. It materializes. But again, going back and referencing that number that you're saying, 10%, so that means 1 out of 10, and then you got the other 9 out of 10, which not necessarily all 9 of those are going to be explosive cases, but what's going to happen is you step them through the process. Like you said, there's going to be things they haven't taken into consideration, things they didn't realize, laws that have changed, laws that are affecting them, new laws that are being enacted that could have affected them that they didn't know about. And now, maybe it is that where amicably they were talking through this process, it's that stronger personality that's saying, I'll give you half of everything and let's just call this thing done, right? And for some people, that's maybe as amicable as it gets, but then for other people, like, okay, half is half, but what about the kids? And then that adds a whole other dynamic to it. And your kids are 2, not 12, not 16, not 18, not 22. And these all change of what this is going to look like long term. And you got one shot really at that moment when that all happens. You can always go back and I'm talking like I'm the expert here. we were talking about how I'm on the opposite side of that as being a kid that, my mom chased for child support and things like that. And really had a very unpleasant experience of dealing in that realm and dealing in that realm with the state. Because she really, as well as anybody else there that it's not like, hey, we just sit around and we wait for somebody to call us and say they need our help getting child support. I mean, there's a backlog that happens there. And in a lot of cases, a huge backlog that requires tons of time, tons of effort. People are really good at disappearing when they need to disappear and go off the radar and all of that kind of stuff. But if I'm in the moment of trying to put all these things together, I may think I know how this whole thing ends up. But then that's where your expertise comes in as have you thought about what this is going to look like in 10 years for your children? Have you thought about who's going to be paying for college? Who's going to do, how is all this stuff going to get funded down the road? And that regardless of what side you're on, you could be on that, the mom side that's looking to retain custody. You could be on the dad side that's looking to retain custody. That there's no one given way. I think there's a lot of perception when it comes to family law, especially in divorce. Like you were saying earlier, that, a lot of the times it feels like it leans towards the female side. Same deal with kids, that it's, I can think, I don't know how many times I've heard someone say, oh, the dad has the kids, then there must be something really screwed up with the mom, because otherwise the mom would have got the kids. I mean, like, boom, right out of the gate. No thought process about, listen, this mom just doesn't want to have kids in her life anymore. And is like, I'm out, man. I'm not invested. But it is the assumption again that mom is a horrible mom, or was a horrible person, or has done something really horrible, has a history, a background, or whatever that caused this dad to get full custody. Yeah,
and that's definitely not always the case. A lot of people they'll term it as, the better parent. Well, I'm a better parent, or I'm, and that's not the standard. The standard is what is in the best interest of the child.
Right.
And so the judge that I'm most often in front of has actually commented before that she said that the cases where you have 2 bad parents, those are hard. The cases where you have 2 good parents, those are actually harder because you have 2 good parents. Yeah. And so how do you decide? Well, what the law says is what's in the best interest of the child.
Right.
And so it could be that you had 2 excellent parents that are both very involved and they love this kid very much and they want what is best for the child.
Right.
And there may be some random detail that pushes the case over to one parent or the other. I had a case a while ago that it came down to mom's work schedule. And her work schedule just wasn't really that conducive for the child. And she was a single mom doing the best for her kid that she could possibly do. But it just wasn't what was best for the child to be primarily with mom because of her work schedule. And it was that detail that pushed it over to dad getting custody. Mom was a great mom. There was no question that mom was a great mom.
Right.
But that it was that detail.
Yeah.
And so that assumption that, there must be a terrible mom to get custody isn't really the case.
Yeah. But again, the overall perception, I mean, it's just, I've heard it a lot of times in those particular situations. But then again, it also kind of works against them, when that mom's now sitting over there and going, listen, man, I'm trying to provide, and not everybody's going to hire me on a, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m.
Right.
So I can get my kid from school and do all these other things. And I still have things that I have to pay for, and childcare then becomes into question. And especially if you're looking at a professional, somebody who's in a professional world, in whatever, that corporate world that really doesn't care about the fact that you're going through this divorce. We've got a business that we have to run and operate over here. And so, of all of the negatives that kind of happen within family law, because the first thing, when you say family law, the very first thing everybody draws attention to is divorce, custody, child support. That kind of was one that really wasn't on the radar when I was looking at it. It was like, I totally get the divorce and the, who's going to get custody. But then there's also the good side of family law that people tend to lose as well too, which is adoption and placement, right? And so that's also a service as well that your law firm works through.
Yeah.
So in talking about, we were saying earlier, like what drew you into law, right? And then you kind of said, you said your mom, you had to sit down with your mom where you're talking about where you're going to go and what you're going to do, and you make this decision, you come back around. You're at the state of Texas, and you're the. Oh man, I want to choose my words carefully. I almost said dog chaser, and that's not a good terminology to use when you're looking to chase people down for child support. But you're in the world of hero to this person, and you're the law to the other person.
Can be, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because you can lock people up for not paying child support and doing all that other stuff. And so, and the assumption always is when you're handling and chasing those folks that this is your responsibility. I'm just here to ensure that this is your responsibility and that it's enforced. You have a choice. We as the state have a choice, right? And our choice will be based on what your choice is.
Right.
Want to go to jail? Don't pay. Want to stay out of jail? Pay and do what you're supposed to. And so you do that for a long period of time. Do you feel like there's almost like this robotic kind of desensitizing deal? I mean, one of the things that I find is, you said it earlier where you said emotion tends to be not really your best friend when you're dealing in law, right? Like law is very much like, keep the emotion out of it. What does the law say? Like you said earlier, both of them may be great parents, but what's best for the kid? What does the law say that's going to be best for the kid in these situations? So really kind of that same deal. I can imagine that there's probably some desensitization that kind of happened. I don't even know if I said that word right. Anyway, you can get desensitized to the idea of what somebody is potentially going through because the law says you have an obligation to this. And so in family law probably is even more critical in that idea, because you don't want emotion to be something because emotion in your part of handling can really affect outcome, right? And we were talking before we came on that in my research, I was watching on your Facebook page, you put out just a quick little video, I think it's like 10 minutes or something like that, where you're on there talking about, if you're going through this, here's some things to take into consideration. And right out of the gate, it's I know you're in an emotional situation. I know that it's fiery and explosive, and every little drop of whatever can feel like 100 gallons of gas on the fire. But being smart enough to back away from that and not let that control what comes out. Because if you're in family law, like you said earlier, it can go really well if both sides kind of understand and they're working towards the common goal of doing what's best for kids that are involved or whatever. But then you have the ones where, man, it's dig-in time. I referred to it as digging the trenches. Let's set up the booby traps, and it's time to roll. And now social media comes into play on that.
Absolutely.
Text messages, emails, any correspondence and communication, character witnesses, all of these things now become things that are thrown on the table. And to your point in that video, you were talking about like, you just need to kind of diffuse those situations. You need to understand what's at risk, what's important, and kind of putting yourself in that role. But it's hard because the stuff has led, twisting and turning and breaking and all these other things have led to this moment for that couple. And people wanting to point blame or wanting to get blame as a part of all of that. Like, this is your fault. We're here because of you, which I imagine probably gets said a lot in when you've got these guys separated out and you're trying to work through this. And so emotionally for you, how does that, I mean, I said you take the emotion out of it, but there is, I don't care what kind of person you are, you can be totally detached from that, but knowing that there's an investment from you in the client that you have. You don't just take in a client and go, what's your bank account look like?
Right. Right. I mean, and that's there's a lot of burnout in family law because of that. Right. Someone comes to me and they dump all their problems on my desk, and now I'm the one that's responsible for all those problems, even though I didn't create them. Yeah. But that gives the client relief because they're like, oh, great, now you're responsible for all this, and that's my job, and I accept it. Some cases I do get personally involved in, and I care very much about the outcome. Some less so, and that's not a reflection on that particular client or anything. Some are just more straightforward. There's not as much emotion at stake. But that's definitely the hardest part of what I do. Right. Is, being involved in the day-to-day, seeing and knowing the long-term impact of what these decisions can have. And while I may represent mom or dad, I care very much about what happens to the kids. Sure. That is, from my personal philosophy, the way I practice family law is I am obligated to represent my client, but I'm also looking at the overall picture and how is this going to affect the children, and are there things that we can do to minimize the effect on the children, or to, help people understand what they're doing is affecting the children, things like that. So anyway. Well, the emotional baggage that's coming along with that, and not realizing like, hey, I realize you got both hands with your emotional suitcases in them, but I got another 4 over here that you hadn't even thought about picking up yet. Yeah. And so being able to, again, refocus your client and getting them to understand, like, is this really worth it? This may get you this, but is it going to be worth it at this expense? Yeah. And so, again, having a good family lawyer that's sitting there looking at that in your client's best interest, but also being able to, like, look, in this 10-step process, we're in step 4, and there's still 6 more that are coming. And here's some things that you don't see right now that I've done 100 of these. I've done 1,000 of these. So I know what this is going to look like as we move further down. And that's really you kind of taking your client by the hand and walking them through that process. Right. Here's how this is going to look. And you're not always going to have a straight and narrow path in that. There's going to be some things where you're going to reach crossroads and decisions that have to be made that can change that trajectory. Right. Or can change that outcome. And again, that's where the lawyer's really needed. And even with the guys that are over there that are amicable and they're trying to figure it all out on their own, and we've already decided this is how it's going to go, usually reach some crossroads somewhere that they haven't thought of. Yeah. And so that's where your expertise then kind of comes into play to say, listen, it's great that you guys can do this and want to co-parent and do all these other things. What about this? Right. Yeah. I've had people come to me all the time that say, oh, we've already agreed and da-da-da-da-da. And, they'll give me their agreement, and then I start to see issues and say, okay, well, we got to deal with this, or what about this, or have you thought about handling your summers this way, or things like that. And that's, where I've done 1,000 divorces, you've done 1. Right. And another part of that too is because there's forms online, and people go, oh, I'm going to go do my own DIY divorce and handle that paperwork myself. And if you want to try, more power to you. But part of the way I see my job is as an interpreter in a way, because there's legal lingo in those forms that you don't understand because you don't have the training.
Right.
There's words that we use all the time, and we get very comfortable. And sometimes one of the things I try to be conscious of is knowing that my clients don't automatically understand. And so you referenced my Facebook videos. I've done several of those over the last few years, and I've talked, I think, a couple of times about whenever you're finding an attorney, it's important to find someone that takes the time to explain things to you, that doesn't just roll out, oh, yeah, well, we're going to go for joint managing conservatorship, and you're going to do, standard visitation, and,
they
understand the time to say what that is. Yeah,
they understand the legalese, but they've got to interpret that down to the, and again, I'm going to choose a word here. It's going to sound terrible, but you got to dummy that down so that I understand what it is. I don't practice the law. I don't use the terminology. And so when you get in the middle of all of that, and a lot of the times there's some lawyer speak that happens over that client's head that then is kind of in one ear and out the other, as to go, let me tell you what this means. I mean, you're almost like the Webster Dictionary to define these things. You're going to see these things in documents that are coming to us. You're going to hear this in court, or the judge is going to say this, and I got to turn and look at you and interpret what the judge just said, because we're not here to go from the bench to the client. We're here to go from the bench to the lawyer to the interpretation to the client, and then back up. So it's this constant, it's people tend to think that, it's just going to be them and the judge, right? Like this is that moment. But that person representing them, that lawyer, is the person who still has their best interest in mind.
Right.
But also you have a line of sight into the other side. Because you're working both sides of these deals as we go. So you've got a line of sight in the other side going, oh, this is where this is going, right? Where your client would have no idea what's coming down the path on this other side. And while you're required by law that you have to share these things between lawyers and things that have to be relevant, stuff that gets found that has to be shared on both sides of that, I'm sure there are times that you're sitting there with that client, and after you're at the tail end of something, you're going, okay, I'm going to need a little moment with my client over here so that you can kind of reconfigure what that maybe looked like going in that day or at that time. And now all of a sudden we reach this other deal, and let me tell you, this is trying to go sideways on us real quick. So we need to go to plan B that we talked about before we walked in here.
That's one of the things that I try to emphasize to people. It is so important to be honest with your attorney and tell them what is going on.
Right.
Don't hide things. If I represent you, you need to tell me. For example, if you are smoking marijuana on the regular, I need to know because the other side knows, and they are going to bring it up.
Yeah.
And if I'm not prepared to handle that, you don't get any benefit by not being honest with me.
Yeah.
Because all that happens is that I'm caught flat-footed because you didn't tell me that this was going to be an issue.
Yeah.
And then we do have to have that conversation
Have you just found yourself like turning and going,
what's the worst is this has thankfully been a long time ago, but I had a case where the party insisted that the other party was doing drugs, and we have to get a drug test. And so I said, okay, I'll ask for a drug test if you think that that's what they're doing. Well, lo and behold, it was my client that tested positive. So, so now anytime I always tell them, look, you got to be clean too, because if we're going to go in asking for them to take a test, they're going to ask for you to take a test, and you better both be clean.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that client attorney privilege, I think there are probably some people that when they sit in the chair with you and they're like, man, if I divulge this is going to come out, there's that moment of like, listen, my preparation is really based on the full story.
Yes.
Not you gave me chapter 1, 2, and skipped 3, and we went to 4, and 3 was really ugly, and you decided to leave that out. And the worst place to find out about that is when you're in front of a judge at that point, right? And so now they've left you like your term of reference was flat-footed. You really have to figure out how to pivot right there in that moment. Like, okay, it's damage control time. And I'm sure you found yourself in that seat way more often than you'd care to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I come in and I'm utilizing you. And one of the things that I found about looking at your Facebook page, there are things, and we talked about even here, like people see on the outside is Courtney Allen Law Firm, and, or Family Law. I'm saying that wrong. But choice, where people make a decision to select a lawyer, really kind of comes in at multiple things. Number one, reference. Like, I've had a friend that's gone through and they referred me to you. I would imagine referrals are probably pretty high in the business, especially in family law business. Second is, I don't have that reference. Now all of a sudden it becomes, okay, what kind of divorce do I want to go through here? And so now I'm doing my research, and research is in some people's cases only as good as Google, and they put this information in. But then for you as well, and I'm not going to refer to this as advertising and marketing, but it is the idea of aligning yourself with those clients that you want to serve because they fit the niche of what it is that you're looking to build your law firm as, right? And earlier we were talking about when you are on your own, you're not partnered up with another lawyer in a group law firm or that corporate world or whatever. Now all of a sudden you have the choice as that law firm and that entrepreneur in that law firm to say, I'm probably not your lawyer. Right? Like, you get those folks that come in and you're just like, referring to it as, tell me your story. Yeah. And that story really then is, a lot of times the story is like, here you go, Courtney, here's a little bit of the story here, right? Whereas you're really trying to get that as open as possible so you can see, like, I want my husband to burn in hell, I mean, like, they're at it, right? And you're like, man, I'm all about trying to help people, but also understanding when you need to turn someone away. I mean, in the Walmart world, I used to tell folks, you can imagine, I mean, we'd see 15,000 people a day come in, right? For 20 years of running through this operation. And I told people, like, when I get called up to the service desk, I wouldn't get called up to the service desk for somebody to tell me what a great job we were doing. I was going up there because somebody was mad. And a lot of the times you go up there and you want to diffuse the situation. You really kind of want to feel out what happened. I refer to it as black, white, and gray. Black, the customer's right. White, we're right. And gray always goes to the customer. And gray is really like, there's some things that went wrong here that we could have possibly created to create a perception, right? And so then you dive in on that. But then let's say it's the old guy that every week is in there. And every week is just, y'all did this wrong. Y'all didn't give me this. Y'all came in here and I'm missing this out of my bag and I'm missing this out of my bag the next week and everything. And I used to say that I would promote him to customer somewhere else. Like, I wanted him to go be Target's customer or Kroger's customer or whatever, because in that world, there are certain people and there are certain people frequenting your business that aren't going to be good for your business, right? Like, doesn't matter what you do, you can bend over backwards and it's still not going to matter. It's not going to be enough. So you got to be front side on that, because at the moment that you take them in, now all of a sudden you don't want to invest all of that time and resource and everything else to then turn around somewhere down that chute and go, yeah, we probably are not going to be on the same page here. Or, you want this, I'm trying to tell you legally what we can get, and you just want me to figure out how to get over to here, and I'm trying to tell you I don't have that capacity to do that. But being a smart enough lawyer to be able to do that as early on as possible, so that the resources aren't just burning away over here. And so, what do you look for when people come in? What are some of those red sirens? Like I say, it's the person who complains all the time in a Walmart, and I get them week after week, or even in some cases day after day, and I know that they need to go somewhere else. What are some of those little sirens and buzzwords and things that you see when people walk in that that this probably needs to be somebody else's client?
Right. So I do an initial consultation, and so we're having that conversation. It's usually about an hour, and we kind of talk through what's going on with their case. And for me, what I'm looking for is, do they listen to what I have to say? Are they willing to hear what I'm telling them and take that on and maybe adjust where they want to go with the case? Now, here's the thing is, that's a very, very initial conversation, and things may change as we get further into it. but are they willing to take that on board and not just like they're hiring me to go be the hammer on the other party?
Right.
Because I'm a free will individual and I get to decide how I'm going to handle things. And part of that is I do have 20 years of experience and knowledge behind me that you don't have. And
Right.
so if I'm telling you that your case is going to be more effective if presented a certain way, or it may just flat out be the law does not allow XYZ to happen. And if you're willing to stop and think about that and go, oh, okay, well, I'm willing to explore other ways to get what you want. But are you hearing what I'm saying?
Right.
Those are the ones where if they're not hearing what I'm saying, or they're not willing to take into account the fact that you're coming to me because I have expertise.
Yeah.
But then you're not willing to listen to it. Well, then that's not going to be the best fit. That's really what it mostly boils down to be honest with you. If someone's willing to consider and listen, I have no problem working with pretty much anybody. But yeah, if they just won't listen to what I have to say, then we're going to have a problem, whether that pops up at the initial consultation or that pops up, when we're right about to go into trial. At some point, it's going to create a problem.
Yeah, well, and those people also are going to be like, oh, yeah, and then a little further down the road, okay,
Right.
well, you've heard what I've said. You've heard, you've listened, and
Right.
those two kind of separating themselves from each other. And there's not a good litmus test. It's not like you're sitting over here going, fill out this paperwork, and I'm going to see
Yeah.
what the score comes back, and I'm going to see if you
Right.
rank in the range of where I
Yeah.
want to take you on as a client. But it's your law firm.
Mm-hmm.
It's your business. It's your name, right? It's not at the end of all of that. It's not their name that's on the outside
Right.
of it. Now they're going to tell you it's their dollars, but what's that worth to you? I mean,
Right.
a single bad case that earns you negative publicity, especially on like a high profile case or something
Mm-hmm.
like that, isn't worth the effort to you.
Right.
It could do more damage to you in the long run than going, listen, this is not where I want to step
Right.
off into.
Well, and I have to consider my reputation with the attorneys that I work with, the judges that I work with. And so my plan is to stay here for forever.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to represent myself in a way that is going to negatively affect my ability to appear in front of a particular judge or something like that several years down the road for one case. That's
Right.
not worth it to me.
Yeah.
So I hope that I have a good reputation. I believe I have a good reputation in the legal community, and I want to keep that.
Yeah.
And so that means that I represent my clients to the best of my ability. But if they're wanting me to do something that I personally don't believe in or can't do, then that we're not good for each other. You need to go find somebody else.
Yeah, there's a level of integrity that is anchored in at the base of all of this, right? Mm-hmm. And that integrity for you is, look, this is it. Once we reach this platform, man, I'm done. Like I'm not going to start breaking loose pieces of this and destroying the foundation of what I built my business and my name on at the expense of, like you said, this one case or whatever. Plus, in that same world, just like there's reputations in a lot of other businesses, those reputations, like you said, are known amongst judges. Mm-hmm. They're known amongst peers. They're known amongst other firms, so you kind of, in building that leverage up, that leverage of integrity becomes important as when you're facing maybe other firms that don't have that same type of integrity. Right. And you can kind of get a glimpse of that. I mean, I was talking about kind of the red flags or whatever, and let's say you're hey, Courtney, you're the second lawyer I came from, and I came from law firm over here. Courtney knows law firm over mm-hmm. there and knows who they are and how they may not really care as much about their integrity. And yeah, you're kind of shopping it a little bit, and I can respect that and understand that for those consultations. Law firm over here told me that they could get me this. What can you get me? And like, listen, again, that's a, here's this little mm-hmm. red flag. I'm probably not your business. There's probably somebody else that can help you better than I'm going to be able to assist you. And again, being able to be PC and say that in a way that's really nice. Again, a reference back to the service desk deal where every inch of your being wants to say, listen, I really don't care. Just go somewhere else, right? Every inch of your being is telling you that. But you have to be able to say that in a way that if it were repeated to your higher ups or whatever, that it doesn't come off that way. Mm-hmm. Like, listen, obviously if you've shopped with, this is an actual statement that has come out of my mouth. Obviously, if you continue to shop with us and we just can't seem to come to the level of service that you really need from us, I don't know what else to tell you. I mean, we just can't obviously achieve that for you. And maybe there's another business out there that can do that. But definitely if I'm spending my money, I want that level of service. So I can completely understand how you'd feel that way. And if you choose to go somewhere else, well, while we hate to lose you as a customer, we understand that you have a choice and we're going to respect that choice.
Yeah.
That's a real long about way. Go somewhere else and spend your money somewhere else because you're a pain in my butt. I mean, so, and lawyers get really good at finding good ways to say things that sound appropriate, even though, again, kind of like the behind the closed door, when I go home to my wife, she got to hear all those stories without the PC filter attached to it. And so, but that PC filter also is important as well to ensure that person also, even though you may not take them up as a client, may still have an opinion when they leave your law firm that they may share with other people. And you don't want that to just be like, well, I felt like Courtney shunned me off and didn't really give a crap about what I had to say. It's like, it's kind of that same deal of leaving that window open for interpretation, that I want to be as clear as I can without being as harsh as I probably sometimes feel like I want to be.
I want everyone to have a good experience in dealing with my firm, no matter what that, even if you're on the other side of a case. I have many cases where I represent one party and the other party doesn't have an attorney. And so I'm always willing to deal with them professionally. I respect the law. I respect the legal profession. It means a lot to me.
Sure.
And so I want people to have a good experience no matter what part of that they're dealing with. And so even if it's someone who comes into my office and ultimately we're not a good fit for attorney-client relationship, I want them to go on and find an attorney that is going to be a good fit for them, so they're going to have a good experience.
Right.
Just again, maybe that's the Pollyanna in me, but I want people to be satisfied, and I think as a young attorney and you're hungry and you want to take it, and so you're looking at that dollar sign and you need that money to come in. It's easier to kind of take that case and ignore that feeling of we may not really be the best fit. Fortunately, I'm in a position now where I can be a little bit more selective and recognize that you may have a very good case and you may ultimately go on to win your case, but for whatever reason, I feel like you would be better suited by this other attorney or this firm that has more resources than I have. I'm a one-man shop. I have 2 assistants who are excellent, and I'm very happy to have them on my team. But ultimately, if someone wants an attorney who's going to hold their hand for hours every day, I don't have the ability to do that because I've got 50 or 60 other cases also going that also need my attention. And so, there have been times whenever I've had clients that wanted that level of service. And while I would love to be able to give that to them, I don't have the resources to do that. So I'm going to send you off to someone that does have the ability to give you that level of service.
Yeah. And so, and you made a good referencing point of the startup piece of that. Like when you're starting it up and you're going out, dragging it, killing it, and bringing it all home, it's, hey man, showed up. There's one at the door. Oh, let's go. Okay. This is it. This is our first one. I mean, you're almost jumping to that conclusion without looking at it as I still need to be selective. I still need to be smart in this decision. And then as you layer on the reputation and the experience and you're dealing more in there, then again, you can kind of be more picky, right? I don't know. That's the best word to use on the lawyer side of it. But I mean, to an extent, you're doing an evaluation just like they're doing an evaluation, right? When they come in, they want to know, okay, is this somebody that, like you said, do I click with this person? Do they get me? Do they understand me? That's from the client side of it. And on your side of it, you're going, okay, want to make sure that what we're discussing, like you said, is being heard, is being acknowledged back, that they get where I'm coming from and what kind of lawyer I am. Because, listen, I mean, you can pull the phone book out and you can find all different kinds of lawyers, from good, bad, and ugly, right? I mean, they all exist, and they all exist for a purpose. I mean, there's no such thing as this particular, family law has the ability to wash away the ugly lawyers. I mean, the ugly lawyers exist out there for a purpose, and there are clients that want an ugly lawyer to handle their business, and they don't care what the end result of that is. They're looking to, take a blowtorch to the whole thing, burn it all to the ground, and get what's theirs, right? So we've talked enough about divorce and all that other good stuff. So now let's talk about the positive sides of stuff. Let's move over to the adoption side. So is this the part where do you feel like your tank gets refueled in this environment, in the adoption environment?
It does. And I will say that there are certain cases, even with custody and divorce, that I feel very personally satisfied by. Adoption is special to me in that I assisted my brother with adopting two of his kids, and I'm assisting another brother with adopting his nephew. And so, it's adoption has really come to play a big role in my family, and it's the happy part of family law, I always say. Yeah. And so it's where we get to see the celebration. I think one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that while adoption is a very positive thing and it's a very happy thing, there's a downside to adoption, because with adoption means that there's been a loss somewhere in the past of the original family for that child. And whether that is a step-parent adoption where, mom has, dad's not involved, and so mom's remarried to somebody else and that person is taking the dad role. And so we're now just kind of making it legal what they've already been doing. Right. Or you have an infant adoption where you have a couple who hasn't been able to have their own children, or maybe they have, but they still want to add to their family through adoption. And so, but no matter what, there is a loss there. And so there's a sobering part of that as well. But the celebration and the completion of that adoption, that hearing where we get to go, and pre-COVID times it was a lot of fun, because you'd have tons of family in the courtroom and everybody happy and celebrating, and we'd take pictures, and so that it's always a lot of fun. Yeah,
at the tail end of this there is the happy ending to the story, and that story had a line to get to that point. Yeah. That's kind of the other thing that I wanted to discuss with you is people who go in seeking adoption need to also understand that's not like you're not running down to the pound and adopting a puppy here, man. I mean, this is a long process, and the process is lengthy also relative to where that child is in that pipeline for adoption, right? I mean, for some people it's going overseas and adopting. Right. For other people it's right here in our own backyard. We have needs for adoptions. And so, but it's also where they're at in that mix, where they're at, how long have they been in the system? What are the stipulations as to why they're in the system? And I'm imagining that same deal of do you look at this and it is the same idea of, are you facilitating, like, here's, I'm working you towards where a child in need can match up to a family and want? Or do you also come in at that where we already have our eye here, we've already been dealing with this particular organization or this particular group that's helping us on this backside, but we've got to also move that through the legal process to make that happen? So
it's pretty much the second. I'm not allowed to facilitate adoptions, that by law I can't provide a child or be involved in that process. And so really, I get all the fun stuff. Yeah. Really, when it comes to me doing an adoption, I'm getting the very end and the fun,
they're bringing
exciting
everything
time
to you.
So yeah, it is. So it's everything. All the hard work has been done, and we just get to go to court and get the judge to sign off on it and make it good.
But I have to imagine that has to be probably pretty rewarding, just from the standpoint that in some of those adoption cases, they've been disappointed multiple times through the adoption process, or something has happened. Maybe a birth parent has stepped back in to reclaim rights or whatever. And so by the time they get to you, that's all been put in alignment.
Right.
Basically all we need from you is we need all the legal pieces put in that then we can present it to the judge to get them to sign off on it. And so like I was telling you before, we've known a couple people who have adopted and got to see that process. And even here in this COVID area where there's not, there's not the courtroom festivities, I guess, that maybe you're used to in that particular situation, that they still allow some people in there. It's still a process of documenting it. And that's really kind of what a lot of those families want is the documentation from start to finish. And finish really is right there in front of that judge. And so I think the same thing. One of the pictures I saw from one of our friends, the judge is there with the family and the kid and everything else. And there's almost, it's kind of that same deal. Like there's a level for that judge that I'm sure like, here's something good that we've done today, right? Whereas in a lot of cases on the backside of what you deal with, it may not feel all that great, but this one's one of those ones that you can turn it around and it's almost always, I would imagine, a feel-good story for you. So, again, another service that you offer up there as well too, positives and negatives. So this is probably the one part where I want to draw you more to the forefront to the listeners who listen, lawyers, say the word lawyer and people tend to have opinions based on that, from the good, bad to the ugly, right? And some of that's based on their experience. Some of it's just based on how they are portrayed in our society. Right. And some of that's really unfortunate. I mean, there's a lot of the times I have a lot of friends who are lawyers or are in the law field, and they may work for a lawyer or something along those lines. And so sometimes just the term for a lot of people is an ugly term. But for you, the positives of getting into this, I mean, you've invested a lot of time up to this point. You're now 20 plus years in of investing into a law field somewhere, whether that was child support all the way down here to family law to adoption. So give me the positives and the negatives on that. I mean, you always want to stay impartial, right? That's always kind of your goal, is to think with your mind through the law that gets put in front of you, and to not let the emotion be the thing that guides your decision making. Kind of like what you were saying in your video, like, make smart decisions. Don't just do this because it feels good, or just because this is the one thing that I know that is really going to poke the bear and really make it worse. So for you in the tail end of all of this, and 20 years in now that you look at it, the positives and the negatives of what it is that you do and how you represent people.
So the negatives is probably the stress. There's high stakes to what I do, and thankfully I don't practice criminal law where somebody's life is at stake, but close to it. Sure. Family issues are very, very close to our hearts and have a huge effect on people's lives. And I recognize that what I do can have a big effect on someone's life for many years. Yeah, and so there's a lot of stress there, a lot of pressure. And there are cases that I take home at night and I wake up at 3:00 in the morning, and I try, by being selective, I try to do that less. But the reality is that even the clients that I've been very selective with still have high stakes cases that end up personally meaning a lot to me. And so I wake up at 3:00 in the morning worrying about how we're going to handle that or how we're going to get past that. But there definitely are benefits, because otherwise, if it was all negative, I wouldn't do what I do.
Right.
I enjoy a lot being able to walk clients through their difficult times. Seeing some of my favorite clients are helping clients walk through a divorce. And while I certainly don't wish a divorce on anybody, and I hope that nobody ever has to go through that, I personally find it very rewarding to have someone come into my office who is in a very tough spot, in a very broken spot, and then walk them through and have them come out on the other side excited about a new life and starting over, and excited about the possibilities that they have now that they didn't have before. And that, to me, is probably the most rewarding part of what I do. Seeing how they can change, how their outlook can change, and go from being very broken to excited for the future. Because I personally believe that life gets better. It can get better. And so I want to see that happen for my clients.
Well, and some of your clients have never experienced life on their own.
Right.
I mean, in a lot of cases, maybe they got married early,
right.
All they know is being with this person, right? And so it's a new identity, not just a new life. I mean, it's going to look a lot different, obviously, after that, but it's a new identity. It's kind of like a rebirth in some cases for a lot of folks. The negatives outside of the stress, do you feel like in the role of being a servant to these folks that you walk them and step them through the process, and you try to do that in a way that has the least amount of damage, right? Where you can hopefully on the other side of this make it a feel-good story at the ending of all of that. The personal toll on you outside of stress, do you feel like there's this personal toll where you look at things maybe jaded?
So the interesting part of that is I'm personally single, and I would love to be married, and but whenever I go on a date or something, and I happen to mention that I'm a divorce lawyer, I usually kind of get a step back from the person, like I'm going to then take all these tricks that I know to get everything out of them. And I'm like, that's not me. I've
got this prenuptial agreement,
right? I know. I'm like, no, that's my job. That's not how I handle my personal life.
Right.
Thankfully, I don't think it's affected me that way. I am very blessed in that I don't have a lot of personal drama in my life.
Right.
I do have a lot of work drama, but I'm able to mostly keep it at work. So that
you didn't come from that background.
No, I'm very lucky. My parents have been married for 53 years, I think.
Right.
So,
even your example here, even though you work an opposite side of that in a lot of cases, the example is still over here that this can still.
I'm very much a believer in love and that it can work out, even though I see every day the times where it doesn't.
Yeah.
But I have a lot of personal hope about that.
Well, and I just when you step into a role of being a servant leader in somebody's life that is at a crossroads they probably never imagined they would be at, especially in the beginning, and they saw this just dissolving, I don't even know the word to work through it, but I mean, it's a dissolution that's happened through the process of their marriage over however many years that they've been married. And you're now trying to get them to see, like, listen, I know you're in the storm right now, and I promise there's an end to all of this, and I promise there's sun on the other side of all of this. And you walk them through that process, and then you're going to repeat that over and over and over. There's a part of yourself that you give away to that. I mean, there's a part of yourself that just kind of plucks away, and you want to utilize your role, your career, really not just your company that you've established and grown, but your career that you've put in to get the best result for your client, but also leave something on the table for you at the tail end of it. That I find it fascinating that if you're in a certain field that, listen, I'll back this up. I'll make it a lot more simple. I used to say that retail ruined Christmas for me. I mean, it just did. Yeah. I mean, it is hard to be in retail, go through what you go through every holiday season, knowing that I'm going to spend about 4 hours on Thanksgiving with my family, that, Christmas morning, the one day of the year that we're actually closed in a Walmart, that I'm going to be able to spend valuable time, which probably isn't going to happen because I'm going to be thinking about what I got to do the next day. And you do this over and over and over for 20 years. And for 20 of those years, almost 20 of those years, not having a child made it even worse because I didn't have this thing to anchor me over here, right? This thing to make it all about here. And so you lose every year, the longer you do it, you lose more empathy to it, right? I've got a partner with me that's just good. How it is, man. It's a retail life. Retail life over here is knowing that I'm probably going to end up putting up the tree and I'm going to be the one that has to push to get the decorations done and all of this other stuff. But there's this constant pluck away at that happens. Now, in stepping back from that, now having a child and everything else, there is pieces that come back to it. and vicariously I can live those now through this little entity over here that I'm trying to make a good human, but that I really probably needed through that 20 years. And that probably still wouldn't have been enough to make it okay. I mean, it was, in that world, you look at it and go, I can't wait until Christmas is over. The complete opposite reason for what for how you should be looking at it. And so, but it didn't start that way. But every year after year after year of doing it, it's just a little bit more that kind of goes away. You understand that you're doing it for the betterment of the company, the corporate world or whatever. Now, it looks a lot different now, and it looks a lot different when it's on the entrepreneur side of it, because you can pick and choose, right? Now, we close down for the holidays. I spend time with my family. Christmas means more to me than it ever has at any given time in my life. So there is this fill back in that now happens, but there's so much that came out over those years that it's tough to fill that back in. And so I'd imagine probably the same thing. There were probably things that were eaten and taken away from you at the state level that really just became more of a grind. You work back into the entrepreneur side and you're filled back in with this. But each case that you take on, there's stuff that you have to give away from yourself in order to get that person through the storm and get them to the other side. And so that's kind of earlier when I was saying, like, things like adoption are almost like a refill. It's like pouring back into the bucket that I'm dipping out of to help my clients. And I think that's the one thing about lawyers that people don't get to see and hear. It's easy to put a tag on you and go, oh, you're a lawyer. And like you said, like, I go out on a date and I'm a divorce lawyer. That's even worse, I mean, so, but much in the same deal. Think about the stigma that is attached to a criminal defense lawyer, right? I mean, and you're the criminal defense lawyer that is the one that they can't find anybody to represent themselves, and you're responsible for representing them because you're appointed, and now all of a sudden you go telling friends that, oh yeah, that guy that's in the news that did this to that kid or to the wife or to the girlfriend, I'm responsible for defending them. And so again, and it's, I know people who've done that and then jumped out of that and went somewhere else. So like, this is not where I wanted to be. But there are some people that live in that world every single day, and there's pieces that get pulled away in that. But when you see things happen for a positive, for a good at the end of that, some of that gets refilled back into you. But definitely. I think it's unfortunate that people don't get to see that. Now, maybe your closest friends that talk to you and everything else that you have a good relationship with, your family, they all get to see it and experience it. They've probably seen you at your lowest lows and at your highest highs. Yeah. But also knowing that lawyers are people too, and that it's not just, the law is who I am. I am the law, I mean, it's the idea that I'm a person. I was a human long before I was anything else. And so...
Well, and the law is complex, very complex. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I feel like there's still a lot I don't know about family law. Yeah. The book that I work out of is that thick, and so things are changing. Every 2 years, our legislature goes into session and makes changes. We just had a huge change come down from the Supreme Court on January 1st on discovery rules, and I'm still trying to learn all that and get it all straight and figure out how that's going to affect us. And so... know that even as attorneys, we're humans. We make mistakes. Now, I try very hard to do what I can to rectify. If we've dropped a ball in our office, we try to do everything we can to stay on top of it and get that fixed. And so hopefully those balls get dropped less and less as we get more experience with stuff. But the reality is that things happen. I had a case recently where this wasn't even somebody's fault. We were all ready to go to trial, and we showed up and the judge was sick that day, and we couldn't do the trial. And it was disappointing for everybody. No one at fault for that. It just is, it's just a bad thing that happened. And my clients were really, really disappointed because they were ready for their case to be over. Right. And I understand that. And so, I would encourage people to have a little bit of grace and understand that we are also human beings working in this system. Right. And I don't do a lot of CPS anymore, but a lot of people, you hear the horror stories about CPS, and I've done CPS in the past, CPS work in the past, and it's a situation where they can be damned if they do and damned if they don't. And they're human beings working in a system. We're not robots that always spit out the exact correct answer.
Sure.
The law and working in the law it's a judgment call, and we are evaluating all kinds of different factors to look at the case in total and figure out what is the best way to proceed on this. And I might approach it one way, and the attorney down the street might approach it a completely different way. Doesn't mean that either one of us is right or wrong. That's just our particular style and our particular approach. And so, again, I would say when you're evaluating which lawyer to go with, part of your evaluation needs to be, is this person going to approach it from the way that I would prefer to have it handled? And, talking about, is this going to be the bulldog attorney or try to reach an agreement? Well, my personal style is that I'm going to do everything I can to reach an agreement. I can be in a bulldog if I have to. And I love being in trial. It's one of my favorite things to do in my job, is to go in front of a judge with a really good attorney on the other side, and we go at it in court all day. It is fun, for lack of a better word. Not everybody would consider that's fun.
Right.
But there have been days I've walked out of court and I'm like, man, that was really fun.
Yeah.
Because that's what I'm trained to do, and I'm lucky that I get to do that. But I also recognize that going into trial, as much as I have fun with it, that's not always what's best for the two people who are sitting there that this matters to the most.
Right.
They're going to go home and they're going to have to look their kids in the face and deal with the fallout of whatever the judge decided that day, where I'm going to go home and play with my puppy and have fun and not completely blow it off, because there is that emotional toll that it takes. But ultimately, I'm going to reach a point where I'm going to move on to the next case and close this one up and then go on and do other things. And I'm not living with that outcome day after day after day.
Yeah, if not anything, I mean, I think the part of recognizing that at the end of all this, even though the name separation may happen right here at the divorce, this one's still always going to be mommy. This one's still always going to be daddy. And there's still going to always be that connection, even down past the point of what happened there in trial. Yeah. Do you find when you're sitting across from that good attorney that you were talking about, like you enjoy when it's somebody who's of equal measure, I guess, that it's kind of like a chess match between the two of you?
It can be. I mean, there have been times whenever I'm sitting in court I'm thinking like, I can't believe that they're doing that. Would they just stop, or whatever? But I also see exactly. I know what they're doing and I know why they're doing it.
Yeah.
And it's my job is, and I think you referenced this earlier. My job is to evaluate the case from the other side and say, okay, if I'm their attorney, here's what I'm going to say and here's what I'm going to use and how I would present that case, so that then I can be prepared to defend against it.
Yeah, you have to do a lot of preparation for multiple things that can come out.
Right.
Like, I realize this might come out or this might come out, but I want to be prepared for A, B, or C, whatever this lawyer is going to decide to go with here. And kind of that same deal. It's like leading out. I say chess, so I'm leading out. So, okay, I see where we're going here. So this is my counter move to that. And then we kind of walk through this. You referenced your puppy. I told you I was going to talk about COVID. I'm actually going to leave COVID off the table, I think, today.
Sure.
In that, and just to kind of bring everybody just quickly up to speed, we were talking about whether there's an uptick in divorces during COVID time and things like that. And I think a lot of that some of that is obviously probably an obvious question when people who maybe don't get along real well spend a lot more time with each other, or forced to spend more time with each other. And then that kind of escalates some of those deals. But in most of your social media platform that I've looked at, probably every third or fourth post is a picture of your puppy. So tell me about this puppy that doesn't like snow. So
that's Holly. I've always had miniature schnauzers. I grew up with them and I love the breed. I had two that were brothers that I had adopted from a rescue, and they both ended up passing away in the last couple of years. And so the most recent one was in May that he passed away, and I knew that I was going to get a puppy And so in doing that, I really wanted to get a dog that I could bring to work with me. I love dogs.
I was fixing to ask that question. Yes. If this dog travels with you to work.
She does, not always, but she generally does. She's still a puppy, so we're still learning. She's almost 6 months old. And so when I got her, I was very intentional to try to find one that had the right temperament and tried to train her as much as possible to encounter a lot of people and not bark like crazy, because Schnauzers are terriers and they tend to bark. And so I've gotten very lucky. I don't know that I necessarily did anything to make it happen, but she's come to the office with me several times, and when clients are there, and she'll greet them at the door. And I've had a couple of mediations where, because we're doing things by Zoom now, my client and I are at the office appearing by Zoom for the mediation, and I'll bring her, and so my client can sit there and pet on her while they're mediating their case, and it seems to go well. So
we here at the store, we had at one point my nephew's dog would come up here all the time, Wrigley. And the first couple of years of being open, Wrigley was more popular than probably anybody in our organization. More so with kids, people, and Wrigley was a golden doodle. Probably say that wrong. That's probably not the correct brand. I should know this because I have a golden doodle. But so Wrigley would come up here, and it was that same deal. Wrigley was pretty well mannered. Would run up to somebody, let them pet them, follow them through. Was good with kids. Very, temperament was very good. And we started becoming known as, instead of people walking in, they were here to get something. The kids were now coming in and going, "Where's Wrigley at?" That's where they wanted to go. So I was going to ask if the dog makes appearances at the law firm there, because it is, I don't care how you put it. I mean, it's disarming, right? Like people walk in and there's stress already. I can imagine walking in, and then here's this cute little dog that comes running up, and how can I be stressed when I see this cute little dog wanting to jump up and get a pet and let me hold it for a little bit or whatever. And so, but do you feel that Holly also is an extension and a representation of you? Like it makes you more human with your clients?
I hope so. I mean, I have my life outside of the law firm, and she's a big part of that. And I don't have children, so she's almost like my child. I'm not quite the same. But
for 15 years, we had lots of little four-legged children running around our house. I get it.
So she was the best thing to come out of 2020 for me. I got her in September, so she brings a lot of joy to me personally. And so I want her to be. She's not a formal therapy dog, and I don't claim that at all. But to have that effect on clients, that if you're coming into the office and you're going through a stressful time, that she can be there to kind of help. And I realize that not everybody is a dog person. And so, like I said, she's not necessarily there every single day. And if I know I have someone coming in, I may say, "Hey, are you okay with Holly being here?" And just make sure, because not everybody loves dogs the way that I do. But yeah,
we learned that lesson too. We had so the good thing about Wrigley, and Wrigley's hypoallergenic, so it helps if you have anybody that has around the area or whatever that had an allergy effect that might happen to pet dander or things like that. But then it turned into other stuff for us. Wrigley didn't go away because just wasn't working for us anymore or whatever. Wrigley went away because then all of a sudden somebody'd bring a cat, and somebody was bringing pet this, and all this other thing. And we started turning into more of like a zoo. Then we turned into more of this is our
business. We are still a business,
kind of our mascot. I really felt at one point that Wrigley was our mascot kind of for our store. But granted, looking through our organization, two of us in the ownership are dog people. The other one, not so much. So it's also kind of one of those deals where we wanted it to be different, right? Like how many places do you walk in and you see this dog, and a dog that is well-mannered and temperamental, that it can, make a connection with your customer right as they walk in. That being said, I'm talking about that not everybody's a dog. I've also watched people go, and like the dog's on a full run to them just because it's excited to see them, but maybe they've had a bad experience.
Right.
But we've had multiple social media posts when Wrigley was around that, again, come see Wrigley. I mean, it was almost that, for a while there, he was some of our marketing. And I noticed that in your social media pages. I noticed him in, posts with you or at the office or whatever. And so, and I'm assuming like the people who are around your office probably enjoy having him around as well too. So him? Her. I keep
that's okay.
It's Holly. So let's follow the name here. So, but I also find that to be something that is an unsaid extension of yourself. Like, somebody just walks in and sees this little dog running around there or whatever, and they know it's your dog. Well, right out of the gate, oh, you're a dog person and you have this little dog. And, so I find that to be a disarming deal in a lot of situations, that an animal, something as simple as a little four-legged dog can be the thing that can, like you said, alleviate stress, maybe even refocus somebody, that again, they're coming in there for probably one of the worst times in their life. But, again, while we're going through this is also who I am. Right. I'm not just, sitting over here telling you that, I'm Courtney Allen, the lawyer. I'm also Courtney Allen, the dog mom, so, and it's got sweaters and all these other things that I like to put on her and, make her cute and do all that stuff. And so, but it is like having a little kid, and so, but again, I think that is, seeing that interjected into what you're doing through your law firm and everything else is just another way of softening your image, I guess, because again, you may not necessarily carry that softened image with just the job that you're doing, and the career that you've chosen to walk. So
it's funny. I was, on vacation one time with my sister, and I had to deal with something from the office, and she looked at me and she was just like, "Oh, that's Courtney the lawyer," you know? And I didn't even realize I had gone into lawyer mode, but apparently I had. So, that can get very separated, and to kind of bring it back together and recognize that, I'm a human being that has a dog, and I love to travel, and I have, many aspects of my personality, not just my job. Yeah,
tied in and associated here with your little four-legged child, right? The other thing I find is like when you're really stressed or something like that, or you're not having a good day and that dog comes running up to you, it's kind of hard to like hang on to all that stuff while you're petting them. It just kind of draws all your attention. You're in that moment right there. So I can also understand how your clients could also gather that same kind of experience in that, I'm in this moment, but look at this little dog, so, so let's talk about the last piece, and this was the part that I kind of told you we'd kind of wrap up with here. Is there are a lot of choices. There are a lot of places that people can go for family lawyers here. Now, we didn't kind of talk about, you don't just service just the Bryan College Station area. You go out as well too. You're about out to...
So I primarily handle Brazos County, Robertson County, Grimes County, and Burleson County. Okay. I can go anywhere in the state of Texas. I'm licensed to practice law in the state of Texas. My personal philosophy is that it's better to hire an attorney that is familiar with the court that you're going to be in. Yes. Because, in the courts that I go into, I know those judges fairly well. I've been
you're
here
building
13
relationships.
years.
Yeah.
And it's, I have an idea of, this judge is really going to get focused on this issue, or this judge is going to have a problem with this issue. And part of that comes with experience and going into those courts many times over many years, and learning the things that their particular hot button issues that they get focused on that may be something that has come up in your case. And so we need to know, is that going to hurt you or is that going to help you? Right. And so, like I said, I could go anywhere in the state. I choose to stay here locally because I feel like that is what is best for my clients. Yeah, and this is home. True. I mean, and for you now, this is home. Absolutely. Probably permanent home forever. Yeah. So, and again, it's that reputation that you're also trying to build and protect in your home as well too. So we refer to it here as our backyard, right? Yep. Like this is what we want to ensure our focus is. And while we'd love the idea to be able to help people further out, ultimately our goal is always in our backyard. And so
So I'm in the market at this point. Now all of a sudden I found myself that I need to look for that family lawyer for whatever it is, for a divorce, for adoption, or whatever. And kind of that final question I told you I kind of bring back around to is so there's the Courtney Allen that people are getting to know here and they see on social media, and Google will pop up your law firm and everything else. But why? Why am I coming to you? What is it that when I come to you, obviously coming to you being an open book and telling you everything and understanding after having a conversation here that you really want to align with that client as much as possible. Why am I going to look at Courtney Allen as my option to go to?
Sure. So 20 years experience in family law. I have 13 years here, experience here in Brazos County. I am going to shoot straight with you. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear just because I think that's going to get you to hire me as your attorney.
Sure.
I'm not going to promise things to you that I don't really think that we're going to get.
Right.
If anything, I'm probably more conservative in, if you're asking me, and I'll have clients ask me often, like, okay, what are the chances of this happening? And I'm probably going to be pretty conservative in telling you that I think that we're going to get that, because I don't want to give you too overconfidence in that. Oh yeah, you're just going to walk in there and the judge's going to give you everything that you want.
Right.
I want you to evaluate and I'm going to be evaluating. Is this really the most efficient use of your time and your money? Any kind of legal action, especially in family law, can get extremely expensive. And so as much as I would be happy to take your $10,000 or whatever number that comes to, I also want to go home and sleep at night and know that I've done that with a good conscience and I haven't just taken your money from you. And so I'm going to evaluate your case and decide, is this worth going to court over? Obviously, if it's a divorce, you may not have any choice over that.
Sure.
But if it's my kid's telling me that they want to come live with me now, okay, let's talk about that. Let's kind of work through that and figure out, is that really what they want, or is that's because they love you and they want to tell you what they think you want to hear?
Yeah.
And so, I'll evaluate things from that angle. If someone comes to me and they say, I really want to get an agreement, then I will do everything I can to help you get an agreement. I want you to get an agreement because I believe that if parties are able to get an agreement on the legal action, let's call it, say, the divorce, or whatever that initial action that they're having to deal with each other in the legal context, if we can get an agreement on that, my hope and my belief is that makes it easier for them to work together and agree in the long run. If we've spent 6 months going in and out of the courtroom, throwing all the mud we can at each other, it's going to take years for them, if they ever are able to get back to a point where they can work together. And I really want to see co-parents who can call each other up and say, hey, something came up for me, can you get this? Or, I noticed that little Johnny's talking about XYZ. Can you help me figure out what's going on? That, we may not be married anymore.
Right.
And so we're not husband and wife, or husband and husband, or wife and wife these days. But we are co-parents. And so we can look at each other as another adult, that we both love this child or children. And so we are working as hard as we can to do what is best for these children, and we're doing that together. And so that is what I would love to see for all of my cases. And so I try very hard not to create issues as attorneys, because I think sometimes we can unintentionally. Sometimes I'm doing my job, and I have to tell you the law doesn't allow for what you want. But there are times as attorneys that, we can, whether it's intentional or unintentionally, get in there and cause things to blow up. And so I try very hard not to have that happen.
Well, and it's important not to necessarily align yourself with a lawyer that's going to tell you everything you want to hear. because you need somebody who's impartial in that situation, who steps away from the emotion and the explosiveness that's typically involved in those kind of cases, to be able to be a voice of reason to guide you.
Right.
And so, like you said earlier, that may not always be hearing what you want to hear. And it may be hearing some of the hard things that you didn't even anticipate hearing in those particular, whether it's consultation or if they're on retainer and they're using your services. I heard you say one thing that I want to work back around to, and it was earlier on in the podcast, and you and I met as a part of the small business and entrepreneur page, where I kind of offered the ability for people to come on here and talk about their business and promote their business. But you said something that has come up multiple times here at the table, and I wanted to touch back on it because I'm pretty sure it's probably important in your life, and I'm just curious how that's carried on for you. You used the word earlier, you said mentoring. That you had somebody in your life as a part of your professional career that was a great mentor that helped guide you and help work you through this process of understanding best ways to handle things and things like that. I view the group as a good spot for mentoring. I've said that group is more like almost like an open source group where it's small businesses and entrepreneurs that are, they're talking and promoting their business and telling everybody what it is that they do. But it's also one of those pages where, hey, I need something, I'm looking for something. Does anybody have any specialties in this, or this has come up and I've never dealt with it before? Interesting part, just the thing that's popping into my head is, I'm an entrepreneur, I have a small business, I'm going through a divorce. And how does that affect my small business? Right. And what do I have to look forward to, and how can I protect myself as a part of that, or whatever. And so that mentoring piece that really helped kind of mold you in the front side, probably even sparked the entrepreneurial spirit to move away from it to create your own opportunities for yourself. Be your own boss, so to say. How do you see that do you push that forward? Do you have other people that you mentor now? Do you view mentoring as a part of that client-lawyer relationship where you're mentoring them through not just what they're going through? I mean, that's kind of a guide, right? But the mentoring piece of, like you had said earlier, I hope that to obtain a view of the future for that person that is sunny and bright and positive and reinforcing, as opposed to just it's a complete show that is just overwhelmed their life and become what may feel like their identity. So where do you feel mentoring is going to come in for you as an entrepreneur?
So I think there's a couple of aspects to that. When it comes to my clients, a lot of times we forget that on my bar license it says attorney and counselor at law. And so there is an aspect of counseling. I'm not claiming that official title as far as any kind of mental health services, but there is an aspect of, and it is very much a big part of my practice in talking to my clients about, things that come up that it may not be legal questions, strictly speaking, but it's dealing with the kids, dealing with the other side. And so there's some discussion of, okay, well, what if you did this? How about if you asked them this way, or if you approached it from this direction? Maybe that might get a better result. And part of that is 20 years of experience. I've seen all different ways that people deal with each other in these situations. And so maybe I can give you some ideas of ways that you might be able to do that better. I'm certainly not the end-all be-all, and that's not the primary part of what I do, but it does come into play in my practice. So that's definitely part of it. On kind of the other half of that I see is working with other attorneys, and not necessarily in like a formal capacity where I have a formal mentor-mentee relationship, but I've always been happy to work with younger, less experienced attorneys. I don't like to think that I've been doing this for 20 years, that I'm that old, but I am.
But you're becoming the Yoda in the group here.
Yeah. I'm not the baby attorney anymore. I'm the one with the gray hairs that are hidden by lots of dye right now. But but I'm always happy to work with younger attorneys to answer questions. And the funny thing is the business aspect of it. So there's a lot of attorneys that love practicing law, but they hate the business aspect of it. And so they are perfectly happy turning that over to somebody else, some kind of a manager, something to run all that for them. I enjoy it mostly, not all of it, but I come from a line of entrepreneurs. My sister owns a business. My brother owns a business. My parents have owned multiple businesses in the course of their life. And so I never thought I would own a business. That wasn't a goal. But after I went out on my own, and obviously that is part of it. And so I very much enjoy discussing business ideas and how to manage things. And there's certain things that are unique to a law firm, but it is a business. Sure. I mean, the reality is it's a business. It just is a business that provides a very particular service. Right. And so, so there's I guess there's three. I started out thinking there was two aspects to that, but I guess there's actually three aspects to that.
Yeah, because I mean, you're, like we'd said earlier, it's not like you're, come in today for this, right. You're not promoting up a promotional product, so to say, like some of the other entrepreneurs that start businesses or whatever. You're a service-based oriented deal that really in that service is very narrow focused as to what it is. There's specific clients that you're going to have that you're going to be able to meet the needs on. And then there's others that you're probably going to go, I'm not that one, but I know of someone that I can reference you to. And working within those groups as well too, and exchanging information. Again, all that being a part of the mentorship of knowledge, just sharing it back and forth. I've talked to many of people who come in and Sam has these sit down coffee meetings with people and things like that. And they walk away, and some of them are like, man, there's some really good ideas that he came away with. And then there's some that walk away and go, there wasn't any really good ideas, but there were a few things that he said that sparked some thought process from me. So it's not even necessarily in the idea of being a mentor that you have to be in the field of what it is that you do. But if you've run a business for 20 years and you're paying taxes and, all the other little stuff that goes along with the behind the ugly stuff that you have to do running a business, and you understand that and you have a grasp for that, you can essentially be the mentor to somebody who's not necessarily looking to be the lawyer to start up a business. Just, hey, starting a business has these pitfalls. They have these benefits, and most people will find, like the ones that get into small business to be their own boss, find that that's not really the driving force behind it, that there is more of a creative freedom behind starting their own business. And then that creative freedom really modifies their business. I mean, I'm sure you went in probably when you opened the doors thinking this is what it's all going to look like. And I'm sure that over 13 years of running your own business there, not necessarily what's behind the model, like what you do under the law, but the model itself has probably changed a lot in 13 years as well too. Maybe through input and guidance from other people, maybe just through experience of doing it long enough and you go, man, this works a lot better than this. I mean, we've learned a lot of stuff where we've tucked money into things that didn't have payouts when it came to advertising and marketing. Right. We've learned that there's better ways to handle things, resolutions to things that are much more beneficial to the business when we handle them a certain way. But all of those places kind of laying their head at being the entrepreneur that also does the give back process of mentoring other people and trying to share that information. That's why I like I mean, it really is one of the reasons why I love the page, because the page becomes an avenue where anybody feels like they can ask the question without the fear of the judgment that may come behind it. Like, I'm not running my business really well. Can somebody help me with this? And again, same deal. You're in a field that you may end up being a resource for somebody in that group. Not necessarily because they want you to be that resource, but just necessarily from the idea of like, here's some things to consider when you're setting up your business, when you're dissolving your business, whatever that looks like. So let's run through how people can get a hold of you. So Courtney Allen Family Law, they can reach you. Your website is CourtneyAllenLaw.com.
Yes.
All right. Address, if they're coming physically to you, want to sit down. Now, you would prefer, obviously, they call out ahead of time and schedule something, not just show up at the door or whatever, because I know that that's not always going to correspond to what your schedule is, kind of like being here today. So they can reach you at 979-209-0791.
Yes.
And set up an initial consultation or come to your office, which is at 200 South Main.
Yes.
And that is Suite 204. Awesome. So anything else that I've left out of that, I mean, you got for your Facebook page.
Yeah, Facebook page.
So
I try to direct people to Facebook for last minute announcements, or phones went out, you can't reach us by phone.
Right.
We're getting that
closed
fixed
for the day,
stuff like
whatever.
that.
Yeah. So. And plus you've got videos on there as well too, where you've gone in and just kind of put out some free little, legal advice and things like that, or maybe people who are in that particular situation where they can use that as a resource or an avenue to kind of look at some of the stuff, whether they're knee deep in the middle of it or considering going into it. That it's things that I think are important, or even one step out past that, which is maybe it's not even me that's going through it. Maybe I'm watching it, but I know or have a friend like, hey, you should probably get on here and look at this. So
I try to put out, and every situation is different. So I wouldn't say that anything in those videos is intended to be legal advice to a particular situation, because there's so many ins and outs to everybody's individual case. So you do need to sit down and talk to an attorney about your case.
Right.
But I do try to do little videos every now and then with things that have come up, things that I feel like is important for people to know. If you're, at the beginning of the process trying to figure out, all right, we've had the discussion, the holidays have passed, and a lot of people will file up for divorce after the holidays.
Right.
They get through Christmas and then, okay, now it's time. And so I try to put out, all right, here's some things to keep in mind, what you might want to consider, what you're, who you should be looking at as far as, where you should find an attorney and all kinds of stuff. So.
Yeah. Or they can just go on there and see Holly trying to run through the snow for the first time.
Right.
And,
trying to figure out how that was.
Yeah, figuring out that your dog doesn't like the snow and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, well, I'm grateful that you showed up today and you came in to talk about your business, and I'm appreciative that you're here in the Brazos Valley, that this is your roots. This is really kind of what brought you back and where you came to. And obviously you're an entrepreneur in a business that's needed in town. And so for us, we want to continue to see you grow. Wish you nothing but the best. Although that kind of sounds like I'm wishing, but best could be adoptions and everything else. It's not just necessarily in that avenue, but and again, if you're in the market, if you're needing services, you're looking at someone who can assist you, walk you, guide you through some of the processes that we've kind of talked about today. Obviously you can sit over here and you got Courtney with 20 years of experience. And again, relationships that you've built in town, people that not just with other lawyers, but judges and things like that can really be of value to people. But encouraging people also to come, have that consultation with you and sit down, find out if you're a good match for what it is that they're asking of you, or can you do these things? And then just seeing if that's something that's going to end up eventually turning into a lawyer-client, and you guys move through and you walk them through this process that nobody really wants to go through, I guess, in certain cases, but may find themselves there. And so that expertise that you carry in there carries a lot of weight and value to people who are looking for that. So I appreciate you coming out today. Wish you nothing but the best. Thanks for coming in today.
Thanks for having me.
We appreciate you guys coming and joining us for another podcast. And we look forward to talking to you guys in the future. Have a great day.